What's a distro and how do I choose one? Well, we're going to discuss that and more today on Jeremy's Tech Channel. So you just started to take a look at what Linux is, and you're like, all right, I'm ready to install this Linux thing, and you just type in like linux.com and you're trying to figure out, wait a second, what's all of these other things going on? There's Ubuntu's and Fedoras and things like Debian and names I don't know how to pronounce. What do I choose? What are these things? Well, we're going to discuss what distributions are, and they are a very useful tool in the sense that it will hopefully give you a tool and a workflow in the way that you will work. The beauty of open source is that there's a lot of people who are choosing and moving things around to work for them and the way they think. So there's a good chance that finding that will be great for you. Now, what exactly is a distribution? Well, a Linux distribution, we also call them distros, is an operating system made from a software collection that includes the Linux kernel and often a package management system. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Don't worry. I would also say that there's another piece to that. A distribution typically has someone in mind when they develop this and they get this distribution attuned and tweaked for a specific user or a specific use. Some of those distributions that are obvious are like Ubuntu Studio, which is designed specifically for multimedia professionals that use audio recording, video editing software. That's designed specifically for that. Another example is Pop! OS. They have their own hardware and they've designed the software for anyone to be able to pick up and use with their hardware. Now, they've opened that up to anyone to be able to use Pop! OS, and it's a very user-friendly distribution for those reasons. Now, you could do something like go to linuxfromscratch.org and build it from scratch from the beginning, but you probably don't even know what you want, right? You probably don't even know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through my process that I went through trying to find what I was looking for in Linux, and hopefully that'll translate for you in choosing a distribution. You know, once again, that distribution is just a collection of some things like which Linux kernel, what kind of Linux kernel, and a package management system. Typically, on top of that, there's a desktop environment or a window manager that tends to work together. Now, the beauty of Linux is a lot of these things you can choose to change or move, but when we're starting out and we're choosing a distribution, these things matter more up front. So we're going to walk through those things with you. For me, I bought a brand new laptop and I'm like, all right, I want to install Linux. But what I did was I wanted to see what would work. You probably have experienced whatever operating system you have based on the computer you bought. Just whatever you got, that's what you got. So if you bought a Mac, an Apple desktop computer, then you have that. Your iMac is set up with Mac OS. And if you bought a laptop from Dell or you went to Best Buy and picked up one from HP, it probably has Windows on it. And so that's just what you use. Maybe you picked up a Chromebook and it has Chrome OS. But if you're deciding to move away from those things, then there's a whole world, a cornucopia of opportunities for you to explore. And sometimes that can be overwhelming. What's going to be right for me? And the truth of the matter is, I can tell you what I think would be user-friendly, but you really need to experience these things to be able to get a sense if they're going to work for you. So I'm going to give you some tips and some walkthrough pieces that might help you identify what would work for you. But one of the things that you need to start with is taking an inventory of what you currently need and what you currently use. This includes software and applications that you currently use. This also means external hardware that you currently use, and see if it's going to work with Linux. Now, there is a high probability that your hardware and software are going to work with Linux. Now, whether or not it's going to be exact is something you need to decide for yourself. And here's what I mean. For instance, DaVinci Resolve has a Windows version and a Mac version and a Linux version. But what if you use Final Cut Pro? That's what I used. I had to choose an alternative to Final Cut Pro. I needed something with some specific tools to be able to do that. Well, there is a website that you can use to see what alternatives are available. It is called, get ready, alternative2.net. And it'll help you get, a sense of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my desktop real quick, show you what this is to help you get your inventory of what you actually Neat. Here is the website alternative to, and like I mentioned, let's search Final Cut Pro, and you'll see what specifically the software is. And there you go. Now we have some options that are alternatives. So you see Kdenlive right here, an open source alternative that you can choose. OpenShot, DaVinci Resolve, which is what I mentioned, Shotcut, all of these other options. Now, there are some other proprietary pieces here, but if I were to click on Kdenlive, and it tells you specifically Mac, Windows, Linux, BSD, KDE. Well, I'm looking to move to Linux, so there it is. Now, I know doing a little bit of homework is not the most fun thing, but if you're really going to jump ship, you want to have as easy of a transition as you can. Another thing is your hardware specifically. You may have a random microphone or camera or a mouse. Now, I'm using all these things and it works great. I didn't necessarily have to spend too much time trying to make sure my hardware works, but you should be aware of that. I am a guitarist as well, and I have some digital processors that can be used through the computer, and I needed to see if I was going to be able to have a workaround for that or not. That's just an example for you to kind of decide what you need. The next piece is actually getting yourself opportunities to see what you will like. And there's really only one way to do that, and that's to experience it. And there's two main ways to experience a distribution. So I've gone, all right, I know what a distribution is. I know what I need. Now I need to know what has it. What has that piece of software that I'm looking for? What has that kind of support I need? I can steer you in a general direction, but the best way is to test these live environments. So you will go to Ubuntu's webpage or Pop! OS's web pages or Endeavor OS webpage, and you'll go through and you'll get a sense of this. Well, how did you know? Type in Linux distribution in your favorite search engine and about 1,000 will pop up. There you go. And probably the ones that are the most popular are going to kind of be at the top. So you want to download those. And typically they come in an ISO. That's a format that is easily able to be put on a USB drive or on a virtual machine or if you still have a DVD drive, you can put that file on and work with it. Now, in a lot of these distributions, they also have a live environment, essentially a test environment for you to see if this is going to work for you. That's really cool. And there's two main ways to do this to test it. There is the USB stick that you can create to be a bootable USB stick and test it out in the live environment with your actual hardware. There are programs like Rufus or Etcher that will help you get that set up with that ISO to be able to boot in and start up your machine and see if it's going to work for you. The other is through a virtual machine, and both have their advantages, and I will say that I use both, but here's my order that I did. I found a distribution that looked interesting to me. Then I downloaded the ISO and I put it on a virtual machine. A virtual machine is something that can easily be installed on your current laptop with Windows or Mac, no problem. One that's easy to work with is VirtualBox, and download that, get it set up. It's essentially a virtual machine. It's a virtual computer that you can use and sandbox and play around and see what you like. And when I go through the virtual environment, I go through the whole process and I see if I like it. Okay, so that's a part of this. Here's what I test when I put it on a virtual machine. I test and I start by navigating the desktop environment. Let me move over to this virtual machine right here. This is Debian 11 Bullseye, and I have gone ahead and installed it on this virtual machine. And what I do is I navigate the desktop. I navigate the desktop environment. Now, that is something you need to be aware of. A part of this search that you're going through and testing these distributions is being aware of the desktop environments that come with it. Now, with many of them, you can choose a bunch. And if you decide you don't like one, you later on can change. So don't feel like you're going to be stuck with a desktop environment or a window manager. Typically, they have a default, one that they kind of set as the user experience. For example, Fedora typically ships with GNOME. Now you can also get spins, is what they call them, with KDE and Mate. Those are other desktop environments. Don't worry about it yet. What I've done is I've booted up my machine, This is Debian 11. That is the name of a distribution with KDE. KDE Plasma is personally, I think, a wonderful desktop environment. So I'm going to navigate it and see if it works for me. How do I work? If I do something, does it respond the way I like it? Now, that's typically going to be more about the desktop environment, so you need to pay attention to that. When I right-click on the desktop, what do I get? Do I get anything? Does the terminology make sense to me? What does open with dolphin mean? I see a file, an icon of a file there, but they're definitely not talking about a dolphin that swims in the ocean, right? Click it. See what it is. Oh, this is just a way to look at files. Okay, that makes sense. That sounds great to me. That made sense. Easy enough. This is how you start to navigate. Well, I want that to, okay, great. What is this box over here? Oh, it's just minimizing everything and just showing the desktop. Okay, that makes sense. Is there something that you are trying to get to that you can't get to simply? This is a part of it, navigating and seeing if the desktop environment is for you. And let me tell you something, desktop environments can be very different. This, for example, is a different desktop environment. It is actually a different distribution. This lets you see not only how the distribution decides to lay out for you with that desktop environment, but now you can see this is a different desktop environment. This is with XFCE. It's just a different desktop environment. It's laid out very differently. Is this something that you can easily navigate? Do you know how to search and find what you need? Settings. I know what settings are. All right. I want to check out appearance. Okay, cool. Okay, great. Oh, cool. I can make that dark. You catch my drift here? That's just one part of the puzzle. Navigating it. Does the workflow and organization make sense to you? Now, another piece that you need to know is how to install and remove software. So if I install and remove software, first off, you got to figure out, wait, where do I do that, right? In MX Linux, they have something called the MX Package Installer. Package management is a part of Linux. That is how you get your software. That is the main way to get your software. Search package on the menu. So if I have this menu up here, I can search package, and I see this MX package installer. There also is this other package installer and another package manager. If you think that's too many things to work through, then hey, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you don't need to choose to use this. Maybe this is just too many packages to see. Understood. Great. Okay, maybe this isn't for us. This is Ubuntu 22.04 LTS. It uses the GNOME desktop environment. This feels a lot different. It looks a lot different, and this is even with some customization that they give you for my own workflow. It was simple to do. But I did want to show you, this is another distribution with another way to get around. Now, maybe I would feel more comfortable with a more centralized software manager or package manager. And this is something that you may feel better about. The MX one is simple and clean to me. And I understand what Synaptic Package Manager is and what those things are, but you may not. You may not feel comfortable with having those multiple choices. You just want it all to be in one. If I need a software center, what does that look like? Looks like here I got a software updater. Things like this is great to know. Is this software going to be updated on its own for security reasons or some other advantages? What does it look like? Well, you should go through and see what an update is like. For this demo today, I'm not going to do it, but you should see what that is. Now, you may not know what VLC is. This allows you to see how, what is it? Oh, this is an open source multimedia player, and it can pretty much handle any codec you want. It's kind of, it's a little long in the tooth, but it works great. So that just lets you know you need to check out installing and removing software and see if the repositories have what you need. This is Pop! OS. It's just another distribution. But This is another grouping of software. Their software center, their pop shop is what they call it. And things are organized nice and clearly and consolidated for you to decide what you are looking for. Are you looking for games or media production? I'm going to click on the media production here. Here are some software options for you to choose and use. All right, I've heard Audacity before. Great, okay. This looks interesting. You can go through and see what you like and what you don't like. Try to install the package, then try to uninstall the package with the software manager as well. Another thing to check out is how much software is installed up front. Do you want it to be minimal, or do you want it to feel like it's got a lot of tools in the toolbox? Either way is fine, but that's something for you to check out. You want to get comfortable. If you're using a virtual machine, go through the install process. Here's the install for Pop! OS. We will not go through the whole install process, but I did want you to see this is a part of choosing a distribution. I went through about like a dozen distributions, just checking things out, reading online, watching videos, checking things out for myself, deciding, hey, does this work for me? Does this work for me? And I ended up choosing 3 distributions. I suggest you choose 3. Once I chose the 3 distributions that I wanted to potentially use on my actual machine, I put each one individually on a USB drive, set it up to be able to boot from it. Remember, I suggested Rufus or Etcher as 2 software pieces that can help you get that working. Booted from the USB, tried it out on the live environment on my actual hardware. Does my webcam work? Do my speakers work? Does my Wi-Fi card work? Those things to see, hey, is this working for me? Yes, no, maybe, who knows? I went through the 3, and actually between the 3, I didn't have any hardware issues. Everything was recognized fine. Then I had to choose, which one of these 3 meets my goals the best, I think, right? You're not making a decision that you have to die on a hill with, right? You can change your mind later. It's really okay. I want to see what matched with what I'm trying to achieve with using Linux, and I end up landing on Endeavor OS. Now, Endeavor OS, the way it's designed, it really wants you to install and remove software with the terminal. It wants you to kind of work through a lot of pieces with the terminal, but it also allows you to install some graphical front-end pieces if you want to do that as well. For instance, if I wanted to install Octopi, which is a graphic user front-end for a package manager, it's there. I could even install the Discover Software Center if I wanted to as well. So it doesn't limit me, but because of my desire to learn Linux, I wanted to learn things and work through things with the baseline in mind. What's the baseline? You shouldn't be scared of the terminal, and I was trying to make sure I wasn't scared of the terminal, that I wasn't going to mess something up. So I chose Endeavor OS. My other 2 that were right up there was Pop! OS and Linux Mint. So between those 3, I chose Endeavor OS. Endeavor OS is an Arch-based distribution. It's a rolling release distribution, so things are being updated regularly. That might scare you. That might excite you. So you kind of have to choose that on your own. But choosing a distribution is something that you have to experience on your own. No one can just tell you, yeah, just use that Ubuntu thing. It'll work out great for you. 6 months down the road or 2 months down the road, or you boot this thing up and your workflow, the way your mind works, doesn't work with the way they have GNOME set up, you might be sitting there, oh, well, I guess I'm going to have to use a different distribution. And so then you load up Fedora. Oh, it's GNOME again. Oh, why does he keep saying GNOME? Watch my GNOME video and you'll see why I don't say GNOME. But desktop environments are just one piece to the puzzle, and those are things that you can shift and change pretty easily once you get comfortable. What is the distribution? You've got that kernel piece, that Linux kernel piece that continually gets updated. Sometimes those Linux kernels are customized for certain things. For instance, the Zen kernel, if you hear that mentioned, that is typically designed for performance in gaming and multimedia. Now you know. The hardened Linux kernel is designed for security in mind. That doesn't mean the general Linux kernel doesn't have security features. It just means that things are customized a little more for those pieces. And the package management system. The package manager for Arch is different than the package manager for Ubuntu or Debian. and it's different than Fedora. Why does that matter? Because there's a set of commands, there's a way of doing things, and one of those may work for you. You combine that with what software is available and what your needs are. You go through and you experience what these distributions are, and now you should feel comfortable and confident to commit to a distribution. It's not a marriage. Doesn't mean you can't change. I've been committed to Endeavor OS and I've had a great experience with it. But one day I may choose to change, and that's okay. For people who change distros or distributions regularly, we call that distro hopping. You're moving from one distribution to another. And that's a whole other can of worms that you might find fun and interesting. But today we've learned what a distribution is, how to find the distribution that'll be right for you, and to feel confident to install it on your system. I hope you enjoyed this today. If you did enjoy it, like it, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. You know the deal. You hear it all the time when you watch YouTube, but it does help us out. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later.